Hey everyone, Clio here, and today I'm going to be talking about the books that I put on a TBR somewhere in 2020 and I didn't finish. There's going to be somewhat of a sort of wave happening within this one because it'll be clear that from the beginning of the year, most of the books that I put on my TBR have been read by this time, which doesn't mean that they were read in the month that I put them on there, but I did get around to them by the end of this year. And when it comes to the more recent months, it is also sort of like that, because in the last few months I've been treating my TBR a little bit more like a TBR again, whereas for a very long time I was treating them like piles of possibility, meaning that there was just like a lot more flexibility with it. It was just a sort of intention setting, and I was never planning to get around to all of them. However, definitely around like the midway point of this year, the months surrounding the midway point of the year, definitely I feel like there's a lot of books on there that I didn't get around to, and that kind of has turned me away from the pile of possibility system, because while that's always the intention, of course, I did feel bad about, getting excited about the possibility of reading certain books and then not getting around to them. So in 2021 I am going back to a TBR system for that particular reason. But so let's just go through it. I'm going through it chronologically, but I'm not going to be focusing on the books very much because there are quite a lot of books on here and this video would be endless otherwise. So the first month, the month of January, I actually have finished every book that I put on that TBR at that point in time. So I don't know when I finished them, but somewhere during 2020 I was able to finish that list. But so for February I do have a book on this list, and that will be And the Mountains Echoed by Khaled Hosseini, which I am quite sad that I didn't get around to, but it's also a book that's it's not a super priority in terms of my TBR, so it'll end up happening at some point. I think I might actually be more excited about reading The Kite Runner, which is one of his most famous works, but I don't have that one, so that's possibly the reason why I'm not super excited about picking this up. But the same thing happened with his other work that I had, A Thousand Splendid Suns. It took me forever. I ended up giving it 5 stars, so I shouldn't really be putting this one off neither. For the month of March I have 2 books that I didn't get around to, and those would be We Are the Weather by Jonathan Safran Foer, which is a non-fiction all about, the acts that we can take in our personal life that will have an impact on climate change, that will help, reduce our ecological footprints. I went to a talk of this author in which he was presenting this book, and I thought he had some really interesting points, and I do very much love his non-fiction work Eating Animals, which I really thought was written in a compelling and an interesting way. So even if you're not interested in becoming a vegetarian, I think it would definitely also be very interesting for you to read it. Though mind you, if you read Eating Animals, it is often said that you cannot read that book without becoming a vegetarian. I definitely know cases of people who've read it who didn't become vegetarian, but I can understand being turned away from the meat industry after having read it. And the second one that I was on that month was Unearthed We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong. Sad that I still haven't gone around to that one, because I was very excited about it that month, but I just didn't end up getting around to it, and I don't think I ever put it back on a TBR within 2020. It just never seemed to fit my reading goals, but so I do still want to get around to it at some point. It's also really quite short, it's just over 200 pages, so would be a nice one to put on a TBR somewhere, hopefully in 2021. In the month of April I put books on there that were books by favorite authors, and I will say that the 3 books that I have remaining are also the ones that were lowest priority for that month. They were just put on there because they were by favorite authors, but I didn't really have an intention to pick them up at that time. First up is Love in a Time of Cholera by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. This is a story set against the backdrop of a pandemic, so you can understand why in April I might not have wanted to pick it up. I don't know too much about this one, but I absolutely loved Gabriel Garcia Marquez's 100 Years of Solitude, and I do think that my mother already spoiled that she got me the illustrated edition for Love in a Time of Cholera for Christmas, so I'll probably be reading from that edition. Next we have The Old Curiosity Shop by Charles Dickens. So I want to get around to all Charles Dickens works, but in 2020 I kind of told myself that I wasn't going to read any Dickens because I was kind of getting into a rut with Charles Dickens. I ended up breaking that rule because I did reread Hard Times by Charles Dickens, and I'm very happy that I did, because it did really rekindle my enjoyment of Charles Dickens, my appreciation for Charles Dickens, and it'll make it more easier for me to pick up one of his other works again and dive into a new story. But I do definitely also want to be rereading some of his works, because there are some like Great Expectations that I would be interested to see whether on a second read I would maybe also appreciate them more, because Hard Times I definitely didn't love the first time around, but now I came to appreciate it so much more when I read it the second time. And so the third one that was on there was State of Fear by Michael Crichton, which was a pretty recent purchase. I think I bought it at the end of 2019. And so I very much love Michael Crichton. I love Jurassic Park. It's one of my favorite reads of all time. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. And yes, it's not maybe the biggest literary work or something like that, but I just have so much nostalgia for this. And so I really, very much wanted to rekindle that. But so with Michael Crichton, I do have better and worse reading experiences. There definitely are some of his works that I find amazing. I very much love Jurassic Park. I very much love Disclosure, for example. I've had great experiences with some others, and then I've had sort of like meh experiences with some of them. And so I don't know what State of Fear is going to be, but I definitely want to try out more of his works and hopefully find a lot more of those great and amazing reads. For the month of May, I actually have 2 books on there that I didn't get around to, and one of them is on my December TBR. First one is Frenchman's Creek by Daphne du Maurier, another author that I very much love, that I want to be reading more of. And so Frenchman's Creek is the only one that I own that I haven't read yet, but I do definitely want to expand my Daphne du Maurier collection, because I do love Rebecca and My Cousin Rachel. I very much love those, and they have sort of like dark, mysterious atmosphere to them that I very much vibe with a whole lot. And the second one, which is on my December TBR, is Weather by Jenny Offel, which is one of the books that I feel most guilty about, so that I still haven't read it, because I did put this on my TBR multiple times in 2020. It was also on my most anticipated reads list for 2020, and I didn't end up getting around to it, so hopefully, I mean, I am determined to have it happen in the month of December, but you never know, so should be happening. And so now we're kind of getting to that midway section of the year that I was talking about, where certain months I had quite a lot on there that didn't end up happening. So in the month of June, there were quite a lot that I didn't end up getting to. First of all, there was Orfeo by Richard Powers, which is a book that I bought in January, and so I wanted to put it on there because I didn't want to leave my recent purchases too long, and sadly it is still there. I don't know whether it's going to be for January 2021, but I kind of want to, because I want to make sure that I read them in a timely manner. But I very much love The Overstory by Richard Powers. It made it onto my best books of 2019 video. It was actually the co-winner, and so I wanted to try out more of Richard Powers' works, and so I definitely do still want to do that. So I think I could probably put it on my January TBR. Another one that I put on there, Stranger Dreamer by Laini Taylor. This is kind of a book that I bought because I wanted to try out some of those like booktube babies, booktube darlings. However, I'm really not that convinced that I'm going to like it, because it's kind of whimsical fantasy, whimsical YA fantasy, I think. And you know, if the whimsy kind of leans more towards like the way that that magical realism works, then sure. But if it leans more towards like Neil Gaiman's writing style, then this might be a problem, because I don't really vibe all that well with that type of writing. So we'll have to figure out where I land with this one. But so yeah, I kind of bought it for Secret's TBR, and I've totally neglected that Secret TBR and kind of decided not to do it anymore, because you know, I just don't feel excited about picking those books up. I just don't feel excited about picking those books up, and so I also don't want to be dedicating time and energy to a project like that. So I'll read these two because I already own them, but I don't know. I'm not that excited, so hopefully I'm proven wrong when I finally read it. Similarly, another book that I purchased for that reason was A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab, which is one of those books where I was intrigued when I first saw this, basically just purely because of the cover, and then I didn't get around to buying it or to reading it, because I'm almost never somebody who reads something immediately when it comes out, and so it became so popular and I saw it everywhere, and then I was in that stage of my life where that really turned me off. That really made me say like, everybody else is reading it, I'm too late, you know, I missed that boat, and so now I have to find another series to try. But so that's totally an invalid and stupid reason, so I do still want to read it. However, I've also been seeing a lot of mixed things about it. So first I thought that everybody was just positive about it, but I have been hearing more and more people say that this is like the one book that by V.E. Schwab that they didn't like, for example, so we'll have to see where I fit in. I've not read any V.E. Schwab, so there's potential there if I like it for me to explore some of her other works. Another book that I didn't get around to in June is Actors by Anne Enright, which I still really want to read, but on the same side I'm also quite convinced that I might dislike it. I guess it's a little bit of a sort of like literary fiction problem, where with literary fiction there's definitely a lot of potential for me to absolutely love it, but there's also a lot of potential for it to be like too slow or boring or like too difficult, too complex. And so sometimes I have this very mixed feelings about literary fiction before I go into certain works, and so this is one of those where I really am not that convinced that I'm going to love it, but a part of me thinks that I will. So, you know, cannot really explain it fully, but so that's kind of what makes me hesitate with this one, because it is also relatively short, so I could probably read it relatively quickly. And then we get to the disaster that is the month of July, because the month of July was supposed to be a fantasy month because it's my birthday month, and I was like, let me read my favorite genre in my birthday month, let me treat myself to it. But in the end I really didn't feel like fantasy that month, and yeah, so I don't even know whether I ended up reading any fantasy that month or not. But there's a whole lot on this list that remained from that month. First up we have The Ambassador's Mission by Trudy Canavan, and actually I put the entirety of that trilogy on there because I was so convinced that I was perhaps going to be able to read them all, which would have been a nice achievement because this is one of those series that has been on my shelves for way too long, but it is happening in 2021. I will be reading this in February, March and April, so happening. You can look forward to it, it's definitely going to take place. Then I also put The Royal Assassin and Assassin's Quest, the second and third book in the Farseer trilogy, on that list. Didn't get around to it. They are also scheduled for 2021. They're scheduled for the 3 months afterwards, so June, July, August. And then I also put another book on there, which is The Lives of Locke Lamora, which is the first book in the Gentleman Bastard series, which is going to be my continuation. So after Farseer trilogy, so in August, September, October, I'm reading Gentleman Bastard series, or everything that is out in that series so far. So apparently the month of July is just going to become the year of 2021. But those weren't the only ones that I put on there. I also put Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince on there. This was supposed to be part of my reread for Harry Potter, but I will say that the whole controversy around J.K. Rowling definitely already made me a lot less interested in continuing on with my reread, but mainly the experience itself of rereading it hasn't been very enjoyable in the past few years. You know, I've been finding myself letting go of the series a lot more than I've done in past rereads. In past rereads, the nostalgia factor has always been so high that, you know, even if there is something to critique, I'm always able to rise above that. Whereas this time around, I was feeling that some of my enjoyment was definitely being stilted, lowered. How do you say that? Because I was finding so many problems with the way in which the series was going, or which certain choices that she was making, or I couldn't get behind certain, you know, like plot premises or things like that. And so I was finding myself, it's more and more difficult to read this the way that I have always in the past, and to rekindle that sort of passion for the series as I've always had. And so with that in mind as well, I'm just like, I was just like, you know, why put in the energy? The whole idea behind this was I was going to read them all again, relive that sort of joy for this series, and make a final ranking for them. But if I'm not really enjoying myself rereading them, then what's the point? So I definitely will be putting it down. I might pick it up again at some point, but yeah, we'll have to see. I'm not that convinced that I'll be picking it up anytime soon. Final fantasy that I put on there for July is The Master of Sorrows by Justin Call, which is a book that I purchased almost immediately when it came out, and I was very intrigued about it, and I still have to read. So There's always 2021, but you know, it's a very big chunker and I've already put quite a lot of fantasy on there. But so the goal for 2021, one of the goals for 2021 is reading a lot more fantasy. So with that in mind, it would be perfect to pick it up. And then the final book that I put on my TBR in the month of July, because I don't know what I read in the month of July, but clearly not a lot came from my TBR, and that is Congo by David van Rijbroek, which is a non-fiction about Congo. And so I still have yet to read this. I kind of started it in August, I think, but I only read a very few amount of pages because then I was like, I didn't have time for this one, along with Count of Monte Cristo, for example, and I'm still reading Count of Monte Cristo. So I don't know when it's going to end up happening. It's one of those that kind of always falls to the sidelines, it seems, and so we'll have to figure out when I can finally prioritize it. So the month of July definitely put a whole lot of books on this stack. You know, without the month of July, this would probably be still a relatively okay list, but yeah, that really set me back. But so in the month of August, there are a couple of books on there that I don't physically own, and they were mainly there for Booker Prize reasons, and I have since decided that I will not be reading the 2020 Booker Prize shortlist or longlist, and probably also not in 2021, just because I haven't really been feeling like it at the moment. And so I've definitely had great experiences with the Booker Prize. You know, my favorite read for 2019 came out of the Booker Prize list, and it is also a book that's probably one of my favorite books of all time. So, and it's definitely not the only great book that I discovered. You know, Overstory by Richard Powers, which I mentioned earlier, is similar. One of my favorite books for this year that's going to land on my best books of 2020 list also is a Booker Prize list. But you know, this year I just haven't been feeling it. Maybe I just went overboard by reading the entire long lists. But yeah, I think I'll just take a break from it for a little bit. But so for that, I intended to read Shuggie Bain by Douglas Stewart, The Shadow King by Maza Mengistu, Bring Up the Bodies by Hilary Mantel. This is not the book that was nominated, but it's the second book in the trilogy, and the third book was nominated, but I also still needed to read the second one. And then Nervous Conditions by Tsitsi Dangarembga, which was also not a nominated book, but it was like the first book in the trilogy, and the third one was also nominated. So for all of those, I think I'm still quite interested in Shuggie Bain, but I am not going to prioritize it, and so it might be one of those books that I'll have on my radar for a few years and might either gets read within those years or disappears off of my radar. Another one that I put on there because I checked it out in the library is The Other Bennett Sister. I don't know the author, I'll have the cover up here. But that turned out to be a lot thicker than I expected it to be, and I just didn't have the time to dedicate to it in the end. I don't know whether I want to still read it, because it's like a Pride and Prejudice retelling told from the perspective of Mary, which intrigues me in the sense that I've never really spent a lot of time thinking about the character of Mary, but that also means that there's probably quite a lot of interesting places that we can take that story. Another book on my August TBR, which is currently on my December TBR, is The Stone Sky by N.K. Jemisin, third book in the Broken Earth trilogy. I do want to complete this trilogy still within 2020, so hopefully I can still get around to it within December. And then another two books on my August TBR, so August is as bad as July was. So first up we have The Dragon Republic by R.F. Kuang, which is the second book in the Poppy War trilogy. I didn't physically own this and I wasn't able to fit it in, and so I think it's more likely for me to read it towards the end of 2021, because I will probably want to wait until The Burning God is available in like the same edition as I have. And so that will be more towards the end of 2021, and so I don't really feel a rush with this series. I don't necessarily feel like I need to dive into it one after another. It might be one that I kind of need to space out a little bit. And then the final one for August that I didn't get around to is Such a Fun Age by Kylie Reed, and that's also quite a disappointing one that I didn't get around to it, because it was also on my most anticipated reads for 2020. but I for some reason was quite hesitant to buy it in the end. I think I was hearing some like mixed things in the beginning, but then after a while I was hearing more and more positive, and then it got nominated for the Booker as well. So I was quite intrigued about finally picking it up, but as I've been saying 20,000 times in this video, it just didn't end up happening. And so we're getting towards the end of the year, towards the final months of the year, and these lists, and now these lists are getting smaller and smaller. So for September I have no leftovers. I've read everything that was on that TBR by now. For October I have 2 left. I have Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte, which is basically on there alongside with The Tenant of Wildfell Hall by Anne Bronte, and it was always kind of the intention that I was going to read one of the two and ideally get to both of them, but I was kind of aware at the beginning that I was most likely just going to read one of the two. This is going to be an interesting one. It's probably, I'll save it for October 2021 as well, because that is Victober and this fits in with Victober as well. It's a Victorian novel, and so probably I'll leave it for that. It's also got a dark atmosphere that fits in well with the end of the year. But it will be the 3rd time that I try to read this, really that I try to read it, not that I put it on a TBR, but that I pick it up. And so I'll be interested to see whether I finally am able to push through. Second book for October is The Vanished Queen by Lisa Campbell, I think, which is a book that was for a book club that I wasn't able to participate in. It was just not possible. I had put too much on that TBR. And so, yeah, I don't know whether I'll still read it because, I don't physically own it and it's not like a high priority on my fantasy list, but maybe one day, because I was intrigued with the premise when I found it out, and I did vote for it to be the book for that month. And then we get to the final book for the final month for which I have conclusive stats, and that would be the month of November, in which I am leaving Meanwhile in Dopamine City by DBC Pierre, which I do really want to get around to. I think it sounds very interesting. It could be right up my alley, and the cover is just amazing, but it also hasn't happened so far. And then for the month of December, I think, so my TBR for the month of December, at this point in time, it only includes books that are already in this video, basically, and then like a reread, which this video does not contain rereads because there were a couple of rereads that I put on TBRs that didn't end up taking place. But out of the remaining books that I hadn't read before, I will definitely be finishing my current read, so that one doesn't count, and then I hope to finish Weather and the Stone Sky. But one that that is also on my December TBR, but that is not going to happen, is Congo by David van Reybrouck. But so yeah, this is the list of every book that at some point in this year I told you guys was possible for me to pick up, and that just didn't end up happening. So let me know if there's anything on this list that you actually think I would love, that you think I need to prioritize, that you fell in love with, and that will hopefully then also steer me towards those books in 2021. But so yeah guys, I hope you enjoyed this video, and see you guys for a future one. Bye!